Good morning, church. Hey, it's Friday, June 19th, and my voice is getting better and better. So, yay to that. Now, we're stuck in this Revelation 13, and I just got to say that doing devos in the book of Revelation certainly is a challenge, in the sense that it's not just like kind of, like these kind of life application in like kind of like this is the way you should live, or this is da 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 kind of thing. This is definitely much more, kind of large scope stuff, looking at the world globally, and I hope you're getting some stuff out of it. I'm really loving it. I mean, I just want to stay in here forever. It seems like there's just so much to study, and I just love it, man. Just eat it up. And so I hope you guys are blessed, because the Bible in the book of Revelation says that you're blessed when you read it. Now, chapter 12 was about Satan. Remember, it was that overview of Satan. Chapter 13 is about this beast that comes out of the sea. We call this usually the Antichrist. But, we always have to remember that in the book of Revelation, we're always getting these ideas of empires and then people that are a part of these empires. And we also want to remember that in the book of 1 John chapter 2:22, it talks about who Antichrist is. Antichrist is the one who denies the sonship and the fathership of God. And we always have to remember, too, that we're talking about places around Israel. So we saw this beast coming out, and it had this blasphemous name. And when you think of a name, you think of like a title. And that's important, because we're going to see that name 666 coming up. And we always think of like, name. But think of God for a minute. In the book of Isaiah, it says, the name, that his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, right? Almighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, Wonderful Counselor. His name. Now, it doesn't mean all that's his name, right? It's just those are titles. Name is kind of the idea of titles in the Bible. It can be put that way. So a name can be obviously a specific name too, but we see other times where it's just in that title sense, like the time of Emmanuel too, God with us, right? Jesus wasn't called Emmanuel specifically; his name was Yeshua, but that title, God with us, is that kind of title for Christ and us too. He is Emmanuel to us, God with us. Now, that is considered blasphemy to other people. Other people would look at that kind of idea, that God with us, the Son of God with us, a Son of God, that would be a blasphemous thing. So it says here that this last beast, and when you see beast, you should be thinking empire first right off the bat. And just because in the Old Testament, beasts are usually ideas of empires. So when you think of heads, we're going to see that heads are going to be kingdoms, and they're going to have kings, and that's going to be broken down for us in Revelation chapter 17. And really, it gets really specific. So you can really look at this and go, oh, well, the 7 heads are actually 7 empires, kingdoms. Because it tells us that in Revelation chapter 17. The 10 heads, the 10 crowns, that are the 10 horns, are really 10 kings, specific kings that represent a group within this empire. And so it does get really specific for us when we study prophecy, and it gets very exciting too, because there's so many wonderful references in the Old Testament that bring things more to light and help us go, whoa, that's neat, and wow, this is cool. And so when we think of the Antichrist, we not just think of maybe a specific person, right, like a false Messiah, but we also think of a false kingdom. And within that kingdom are names and a religion and a creed and doctrine and dogma and all that stuff with it. that is definitely anti Jesus being God. So that kind of throws out the old ideas of the Catholic Church, because they definitely uphold the Trinity, and for sure. So this sounds like a non-Trinitarian religion that's being spoken of here. That First John chapter 2:22 is pointing to, right? The one that denies the Son. So it says this beast has this fatal wound and was healed, and the world was astonished and followed the beast. And men worshipped the dragon. So that's back to 12, right? They worshipped Satan. So Satan's the underlying thing to everything that's going on. Again, though, the Bible points to this amazingly cosmic battle that goes on in our world, where maybe it's more true than we realize that our warfare is not between flesh and blood, and that we really need to take heed to that idea that, man, it is really not against flesh and blood, but it's against what Paul says in Ephesians chapter 6. It's against powers and principalities. And I know people don't like to think like that sometimes, and the reason why is because we have a lot of fear, of things like the devil and demons and things of that nature. So sometimes we don't want to think in those spiritual terms because it can bring on some fear. But we need to cast that fear upon the Lord. For Second Timothy chapter 1 tells us that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love, and of a sound mind, a healthy mind. And so we don't need to fear as Christians. It says the gates of hell will not prevail against us. But I want you to notice that as we go through the book of Revelation, you'll see that in this time in the book of Revelation on the planet, we see that the beast will overcome the saints that are on the earth. So it makes us, and let me just reiterate that, the beast that we're talking about here in 13 will overcome the saints that are on the earth, those that are given their life now to Jesus Christ during this time of the tribulation. And that sounds a lot different from Jesus telling Peter in the gospel accounts that the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. Remember that? Remember Peter came to him and Jesus had this chat with them and said, "Upon you, Peter, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail." And Peter, of course, always putting the foot in his mouth and saying the wrong thing, and Jesus always having to correct him on stuff. But in that incident, you really get that idea that the gates of hell will not prevail. But here you see something different. Now, just for your Bible studies, you guys should read chapters 7 and 8 of the book of Daniel, because they really, really coincide well with chapter 13. And this beast is a empire that is made up of all the other collective empires that have passed through time that have been against Israel. And we see that in some pretty remarkable ways. We see that it's kind of like Babylon. It has Babylon in it. It has the Medo-Persia Empire in it. It has the Grecian-Roman Empire in it. And I think of Babylon, and when I think of the book of Daniel, I think of that that whole section of bowing down to the gold statue, Nebuchadnezzar. And that's what this empire is going to do. It's going to make people worship and bow down. So it's kind of like Babylon in that way. In the Medes and Persian Empire was known in our book of Daniel studies, stories, or events in the book of Daniel. And you can get that by going to Calvary Christian Fellowship. Just type in Daniel. You can go through all of our audio on the book of Daniel, our briefing, as Chuck Missler would say, on that. But you go through the Medes and Persian Empire, and they were known for their laws. But yet we see that the Antichrist spirit of this day of the book of Revelation the Antichrist will seek to change laws, and so that will be interesting. We see it's a lot like the Grecian Empire, in the sense that through the Grecian Empire of the ancient Grecian Empire and their coming against Israel, they had a ruler that come out of that empire named Antiochus Epiphanes, who was really a foreshadowment of the Antichrist in his claiming to be God and the worship of the false god, even going into the temple. And so Paul the Apostle speaks on this too in the book of Thessalonians. But so this area right here in the Bible that we're in is really spoken of and illuminated all over the place. So we're just kind of knee deep in it right now. And it says in verse 5 that the beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies and to exercise his authority for 3.5 years. He opened his mouth to blaspheme God, to slander his name, his dwelling place, and those who live in heaven. Interesting, right? It's like he was his blasphemy, right? To slander God, to slander. Now, I don't want you to think that it's an atheistic society at all. This is a highly religious society, but it looks at the people of God and sees how what they believe as, in a sense, antichrist. And those that really follow Christ on the earth look at this opposing religion as antichrist. You have a tremendous conflict going on here, right, of faiths. One faith looks at the other as antichrist. The other one looks at the other one as antichrist. Wow. One looks at, the Bible's saying this beastly empire with this beastly king is going to be blaspheming. And yet the Antichrist will look at the people of God and blaspheme and say bad things about them and their faith. So it's really, man, this is a big clash going on. And it says they will slander his name. So again, the idea of name, right? The Emmanuel, God with us. That a child will be born unto us, right? A name, Wonderful Counselor, Almighty. They will slander the name of Christ, right? Yeah, that's what I see. The titles of who God is, and His dwelling place, and those who live in heaven. And He was given power. Those who live in heaven. Hey, is that the church? By the way, hey, that might be the church. Hey, cool, right? Hey, so kind of neat. And he opened his mouth to blaspheme God and slander his name and those who dwell in heaven. He was given power to make war against the saints and conquer them. So I mentioned that, right? He was going to prevail against those saints on the earth. And he was given authority over every tribe, people, language, nation, all inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast. This empire is going to be a very influential empire. And it'll be one that's feared. All whose names have not been written in the book of life belong to the Lamb. Now, you could circle Lamb because Lamb's going to come up pretty soon, but a different kind of Lamb. It says, "And he who has an ear, let him hear." Very interesting. We need to have ears. So the Devo application could be: do I have an ear today? Do I have an ear? What is my ear going to listen to today? And we've talked about that before in our Devos, but it's really important for us to always look at that. If anyone goes into captivity, it says in verse 10, into captivity he will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword he will be killed. Now you get the idea that this is not so much a song, not so much a riddle, but it's something that John hears in the vision. That in this time, if anyone goes into captivity he will go, and anyone who is killed with the sword he will be killed. I get the idea that this last empire and king of the empire will be a crushing one that leads into captivity, puts people into captivity, entraps people, binds them, and they also will be ones that kill with the sword. It's hard to believe people kill with the sword, but that happens. And does it happen in the Middle East? And that's how you have to be thinking when you think about these passages. This empire that it's all with Babylon, Medo-Persia, Roman Greco, these empires in there, it will be one that it will take people into captivity, and it will kill with the sword. And this calls, it says, for the patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of the saints. You know, we could probably end this Devo here, but we need to be called, this calls for patient endurance. We need to be people that endure. And to endure, you know, if any of you have struggled against sinful inclinations, you know what it means to endure. You know what it means to fail, and then you know what it means to endure, right? Meaning, when we struggle against things that we don't want to do, we have to endure. And, you know, it tells us in the book of Peter, a really interesting passage. It says, "He who suffers in the flesh has ceased from sin." Man, if you want to cease from sin, there is some suffering that you're going to have to go through. A ton of it. A ton of denying yourself in all joy, knowing you're receiving something greater. And that patient endurance is something we have to work on all the time in life. Especially during this time, right, where there's so many different things that are being said in our own country and things happening, but you have to patiently endure. You have to think through. We don't want to be quick just to judge everything. We want to think. And then it says, in faithfulness on the part of the saints. During this time of tribulation on the earth, man, the saints are going to have to really endure. They're going to have to endure under pain. And it says they're going to have to show a faithfulness like probably no other, right? Because think of that, going into captivity, dying by the sword. Intense, right? So many brothers and sisters have gone through so much tragedy over the years, so much tragedy. And it gives us perspective of what's the hard thing in my day today compared to that. And I think, wow, you know, help me to be grateful, help me to be thankful, help me to share, help me to love, help me to give, help me to think through things, help me to have joy, knowing there's something greater, something better that awaits. So next week, we're going to get into the beast out of the earth, because it says another beast is coming. Now, when you think of beast, again, think of empire first, but then you're going to see that it's going to describe this beast even in a greater way as like a lamb. And we think of lamb, we think of Jesus, right? And then it's going to talk about specific things that this lamb does, and it really follows in the way of Daniel chapter 8, where when you have another beast, that of a goat and a lamb, it starts talking about specific people. So we see it going from empire into specific people here in this area called the beast out of the earth. So we'll look into that and kind of see what is happening next, you know, in this wonderful time in the Word. So you guys take care, have a great day, and stay focused. Okay? Take care. Bye-bye.